So good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Morton Clark, and I am one of the recovery advisors for the Governor's Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative. And I will be facilitating this presentation today by Eliza Zarka. Before we get into the actual presentation, just a couple of housekeeping items. Again, please remain muted throughout the presentation unless you are speaking. That really helps in terms of not being a distraction to the presenter. Also, we are asking that you hold all your questions until the end of Eliza's presentation. However, during the presentation, you're welcome to put your questions in chat so that we can respond to them as soon as Eliza concludes. We will leave a certain amount of time at the end of the presentation for questions, and we will also allow a few minutes after time end of noon. So a little bit after noon, Eliza is willing to stay a few minutes longer for anyone who might have yet another question that we might not have gotten to. We do make every effort to answer all questions. In the event we do run out of time, we will have a copy of all the questions in chat, and we will follow up with you so that Eliza can answer any additional questions that we might not be able to get to. So with that, what I'd like to do now is introduce the Recovery Friendly Workplace Program Director, Sam Lewandowski, who I would like to have her share a little bit about Recovery Friendly Workplace, particularly for those of you who may not be familiar with the initiative. So Sam, can I turn it over to you?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Karen. Good morning, everybody. Having some camera trouble, so instead of letting my face get frozen on the screen, I'm just going to do audio. So we often at Recovery Friendly Workplace do offerings and trainings that are exclusive for our participating workplaces, but we felt that this topic was really appropriate for the public and the community at large. So we wanted to open it up really to everybody near and far. So we extended it to our partners in other states who are working on implementing recovery friendly workplace in their own states, and also members of the community and the public. So welcome. We're so glad to have you all here. We know that some of you know what Recovery Friendly Workplace is and others may not. So just a quick synopsis. Recovery Friendly Workplace is an initiative of Governor Sununu that is administered by Granite United Way, and it was launched in March of 2018. And so what we do is we work one-on-one with businesses of all sizes and industries and levels of readiness to help them really develop a culture that is supportive of people who are in recovery or maybe seeking recovery or not yet in recovery from substance use disorder, which is also referred to as addiction. You might be more used to hearing that term. And we also provide support for loved ones who are impacted. So every workplace that signs on to participate with us, everything we do is offered at no cost, but they get to work one-on-one with one of our 4 fabulous recovery friendly advisors who are all on the call today. Karen is one of our recovery friendly advisors, and she's also our training lead, so helps us bring these great offerings to you all. And if you're interested in learning more, we would love for you to reach out to us. Our team can put our contact information in the chat. And then also, if you want to sign on to participate in the Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative, you can go to our website, which is recoveryfriendlyworkplace.com, and click the Join Us tab, and then submit a letter of interest. And we will also put a link in the chat just so you know directly how to get there. It's a really simple 10-question form, basically just getting us a little bit more information, so then we can get you assigned to one of our recovery friendly advisors, who again would then be working with you at no cost to help you build that recovery friendly culture and help you with things like attracting and retaining talent and really encouraging productivity.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Sam, for that. And with that, I'm going to introduce Eliza. Eliza Zarka is the Addiction and Behavioral Health Coordinator for the Office of Governor Sununu. She's going to present on No Safe Experience and give us the facts about fentanyl today. And I'll just share a little bit about Eliza's background. She defines her role mostly as a project developer, information collector, and people connector. Destigmatizing substance use disorder while providing resources to people where they are at is one of Eliza's favorite parts of the job. She does this through her work with the Recovery Friendly Workplace Initiative, and most recently through the No Safe Experience Fentanyl Awareness Campaign. This campaign aims to inform the public about the dangers of the synthetic and deadly opioid fentanyl that is prevalent in New Hampshire communities. Eliza's goal through her work is to help people be well, get well, and stay well. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Eliza, and thank you so much, Eliza, for joining us to present on this really important topic today.
Thank you, Karen, for that wonderful introduction. Can you all hear me? Okay, great. I don't have to wear this ugly headset. I don't know if I can share screen yet. It's still disabled on my end. But while you figure that out, I'll introduce myself. I'm Eliza Zarka. I'm the Addiction and Behavioral Health Coordinator for the Governor's Office in New Hampshire. I was asked if this presentation was intentionally put on 420. I think that says a lot about American culture, how we have a whole day that it's well known that substances are being used. Our New Hampshire legislature has a sense of humor, surprisingly, and they have put all of the marijuana bill hearings this afternoon, so I have that to look forward to. And I wanted to say that I'm so sorry this has to be on Zoom, but I'm glad that it gave so many of us the opportunity to be together today, including my parents, my friends in North Carolina. I see my cousin from Arizona has joined, my neighbor from Bedford, New Hampshire. So maybe it was my mistake to put it on LinkedIn, but I just did that so that everybody could know about this incredibly important topic. And I'm so excited to have the opportunity to present to you all. So first, I just want to make sure that everyone is in the right room. I studied at UConn, got my Bachelor of Arts, so I knew when I walked into a class and I saw equations, numbers, symbols, that was pretty scary for me, so I just walked right out of that room. So if you're here to learn about what fentanyl is, the prevalence in New Hampshire, information on the No Safe Experience Fentanyl Awareness Campaign, and how you can play a role, you are in the right room. And I'd like to warn everyone that I'm not a doctor, don't claim to be, but I have been at this job for over 3 years. So by day 2, I knew what the word fentanyl was. By day 3, I knew how to spell it. This presentation contains images of needles, pills, illicit substances, drug paraphernalia, talks about death and everything. So that is just one more check-in that you're in the right room. Jumping right into it, fentanyl is a synthetic or man-made opioid. That's technically redundant because opioids are the synthetic form of opiates, which are naturally derived like heroin, morphine, codeine. So opioid is synthetic, made in a lab, and you may have heard of it in a medical setting because pharmaceutical fentanyl is FDA approved and it's used to treat severe pain and conditions like cancer. So in the top 2 images that you see, that is pharmaceutical fentanyl that I don't want to discourage anyone from using it. If you are getting surgery, if your doctor's saying this is appropriate. So that is pharmaceutical fentanyl. What we'll primarily be talking about today is illicitly manufactured fentanyl. I did want to point out that the means of use for fentanyl, you can inject it, snort it, sniff it, smoke it, take it orally. It can be spiked onto blotter paper, which is paper traditionally used for LSD. In the upper right-hand corner, you can see fentanyl patches, which are used in a medical setting, and those can be transdermally used, and they're specially formulated to do so. I wanted to note that there's been some hysteria around whether you can accidentally breathe in fentanyl or accidentally touch it. And that comes from a law enforcement announcement that went out, and that myth has been debunked. We just wanted everybody to be as careful as possible, and we didn't have a lot of information about this substance. But now that we do, we know that accidental transdermal contact and exposure is very low. And I have this quote from the American College of Medical Toxicology that put together a report that fentanyl overdose via incidental transdermal exposure is very low, and it would take 200 minutes of breathing fentanyl at the highest airborne concentration to yield a therapeutic dose, but not a potentially fatal one. Some of you may have seen some viral videos about police officers making contact with fentanyl, and that kind of spread that myth around a little bit. Behavioralists have analyzed those videos and have since put out statements that that is most likely indicative of a panic attack. What fentanyl does is it produces those feelings of relaxation, euphoria, pain relief, but it also comes with confusion, drowsiness, dizziness, and all of that good stuff listed. I know you all can read. The bottom 4 pictures are what illicit fentanyl looks like or may look like, because now it's coming in all shapes, sizes, forms. It can be a powder, it can be pressed to look identical to a pharmaceutical pill, but it contains just fentanyl and filler. The cartels that these substances come from are unfortunately excellent at marketing, and they know how to market their product to sell more. So they do things like dye it and color it, put it in fun little shapes like aliens and grenades, so that they're identifying their brand and the market that they're selling to. I included the picture of the little alien and grenade tablets because those were actually seized at the southern border in Maine. So anything that's in Maine, Vermont, Massachusetts, we know is in New Hampshire. So knowing that those were seized so close to us, we know that these substances have made their way to us, and now it's in vitamin-like or tablet-like forms, which may look like candy to children, or what my interpretation of this is branding, and it also looks like, quote, party drugs like Molly or ecstasy. I wanted to touch a little bit more on the pill pressing of fentanyl. You could see an image here of an oxycodone tablet, an authentic one versus one that they're pill pressing to look exactly like that, so that people may unknowingly be taking fentanyl. There's a lower perception of harm with kids on taking pills versus perhaps injecting substances or sorting them. So it's kind of a destigmatized means of ingesting the substance. And these are some of the examples of pills that are being pressed. So it looks like Oxycontin, oxycodone, Xanax, Percocet, and even Adderall. And there's some others as well, but those are especially scary because they're very popular in music, pop culture in general. So youth know about these pills and hear their favorite rappers singing about them, and think it's associated with fun, or it might not be that dangerous because it came from a prescriber somewhere down the line, and now their friend may just be giving it to them. What's extra scary about this is that when the DEA seized pills off the street, they did a lab analysis, and 6 out of 10 pills that they found had a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl in it. So anyone, not just kids, may be thinking that they're taking a pharmaceutical version of an opioid, but they're actually just getting an illicitly manufactured substance. This also is concerning because people like to put people with substance use disorder in a box, like, oh, that's not my kid, that's not my family. I think I would be able to tell what they look like or what their activities may be. And that all comes down to stigma, which shout out to Recovery Friendly Workplace. They have trainings on stigma, so you can learn all about that from them. And with that said, it's not that first days to worst days traditional substance use disorder or addiction story. The story now with fentanyl in our communities is that the first time that you try something could be the last. This is kind of to put in perspective how little amount of fentanyl it takes to actually be lethal to an opioid naive adult body. So someone who has no history of opioid use or tolerance per se, and it is 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. This photograph actually is from a New Hampshire lab because we have been seeing fentanyl in our drug supply for, I think, at least a decade. And this is one of the photos that gets used in a lot of presentations. And unfortunately, because we were one of the first labs to experience a huge uptick of fentanyl, we are also the lab that got this, quote, famous picture. I think the penny picture outlines just how little amount it takes. Again, to be a potentially fatal dose for an adult body. This slide is another visual that just last year, the Drug Enforcement Administration, otherwise known as the DEA, they seized, my little box is in front of the number, sorry, 50.6 million fentanyl-laced fake prescription pills and 10,000 pounds of fentanyl powder, and that is equivalent to the weight of 2 rhinos. I shorten it to rhinos because still unclear what rhinoceros plural is since my last presentation. And again, the tip of a pencil is all that it takes. And when you think of 2 rhinos versus just that little speck, it's just crazy that there were 379 million potentially deadly doses of fentanyl that were just seized. So that is all that law enforcement was able to get off of the street supply. And when you think about the US population being like 334 million, that is enough that was taken off the streets to kill every single American and then some. What makes black market fentanyl so dangerous is that it has a very, very low therapeutic index, which means that the amount that it takes to have any sort of therapeutic properties or what it's used for medically is very close to the amount in which it would be lethal. So that is why it's so important that fentanyl is from a pharmaceutical company and is monitored by a healthcare professional, because as you can see in the pictures below, there's no quality control. This is a photograph from a scene where somebody was arrested, and I just point out there's NutriBullets. You probably have a NutriBullet in your home, and that is what is mixing these substances that are getting out to the community. So if you think about, for example, putting a cup of sugar and a cup of salt into a NutriBullet, mixing it all up, dumping it on the table, tell me where the salt is versus the sugar. And that is what happens with fentanyl and cutting agents and cocaine. And as you could see, it's nothing like a lab or a pharmaceutical setup that would have all sorts of quality control, very clean environment, no chance of cross-contamination, held to very strict industry standards, whereas substances that people are using and pills are being pressed, this is the environment they're working with. How does it get here? So the precursors, so the chemicals that are used to create fentanyl are extremely highly regulated in the United States, and they're not in other countries like China and India, for example. So cartels based out of Mexico buy product from China and then are shipping it over the border. I do work in politics, but I don't want to talk about the politics of the border for this presentation. So I will just leave it at the cartels out of Mexico are getting product from China and shipping it up through both the southern and northern border. This is also a very good marketing move for cartels because it's not like heroin where you have to have a massive poppy field of products that is dependent on weather, climate, farmers having land, making sure people don't find that gigantic field that you have. Like, I don't know if anyone's seen Ozark, but there's the massive poppy field that is a dead giveaway of what's going on there. And I included this picture of Dorothy in a poppy field from Wizard of Oz because I like to break up my presentation, bring myself a little bit to it. And substance use and fentanyl is not an easy thing to include jokes about. So I joke about myself or maybe Dorothy. So if fentanyl is so deadly, why are cartels still choosing to deal it? And it just comes down to profit margin. So when you think about the vial of heroin versus fentanyl, they can produce that much more product, get that much more product through in such small spaces. And when you think about how much it takes to be, I guess, useful to people who are wanting to use it or unsuspectingly using it, it's just such a small amount that the profit margin is huge. And cartels are like a business. They look at risk and reward, and the risk being that they may lose some customers because it's that deadly. but the reward is the hundreds of millions of dollars by having such a sought after and lethal substance on the street. I have been asked, which scares me a little bit, is this in New Hampshire? If you haven't seen it on the news by now, I'm hoping that you too know how to spell it. It is in New Hampshire. It is not sensationalized. And this outlines our 2022 deaths and our 2023 up to date as of 4/10/23. And as you can see, we had 480 confirmed deaths with 4 pending toxicology. And of those, 407 had fentanyl involved in some way, shape, or form. I also circled, for example, fentanyl and methamphetamine is 78 deaths as opposed to methamphetamine solely, which is 11. So you can see that when substances are used in combination and something as deadly as fentanyl is used, it increases the likelihood of a very negative outcome. And as I'm showing these charts, I just like to remind everyone, because again, not a BS, math numbers are scary, but these are extra scary. And I always remind people who I show data to that these are just numbers of human beings with the tears wiped away. So we can look and talk, but these are people's brothers, sisters, mothers, fathers, parents. So that is what we're looking at right now. Fentanyl is making its way into all types of substances, including methamphetamine and cocaine. And again, cartels being marketing geniuses, so to speak, they market fentanyl as something that will bring you back down when you're using a stimulant like methamphetamine or cocaine. And then you use your substance of choice and then use fentanyl to bring yourself back down. So now it's really evolved from a prescription pill problem to a heroin problem to a fentanyl problem in New Hampshire to now just a multi-substance. So now it's not the opioid crisis, it's the substance crisis. This chart shows where New Hampshire has been over the years. You can see that we started to level out in roughly 2019, 2020. And so when we saw the rest of the country skyrocket in overdose fatalities during that period of COVID, we had systems in place. And since we have been dealing with fentanyl for over a decade, we had naloxone in the community, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But the trajectory now is that 2022 is our 3rd worst year as of now, and just behind 490 and 486. And like you saw in the last chart, 2023 deaths are trending similarly. And I think a lot of that has to do with the phrase, the opposite of addiction or substance use disorder is connection. And in that period of COVID, although we had systems in place and we were fortunate in a way that we did have those, whereas other states did not, people lost connection, they lost realistic access to resources. They were all just in a situation where prices of everything are going up, and it's just a very terrible disease that we now has a grip on the whole country, but New Hampshire is starting to experience what the rest of the country is experiencing. And if you're interested in keeping up to date with what these drug overdose fatalities are and maybe what's in your community, I've put the information to the chief medical examiner's office, and Kim Fallon will get you this data if you are interested. Bringing myself to the presentation again, this is my car, not my exact car because you can't know who is road raging behind you on 93. I put a picture of this because we always see car accidents in the news and those are always reported on, and there were 139 car accident deaths in New Hampshire in 2022. So when you think about how often we see those deaths reported on and think about how it feels like so many people die from car accidents in New Hampshire, that's only a fraction of how many New Hampshire citizens die from a drug overdose death. Drug overdose tops car accidents, homicides, suicide, kidney disease, the flu and pneumonia, diabetes. So it's way up there in the terms of the causes of death for New Hampshire citizens. One thing that you may have been hearing about in the news recently is about xylazine. So this is a non-opioid veterinary tranquilizer that is not approved for human use. And you know, the pharmaceutical industry tried it, it had been tested, it was not approved for human use. So when, again, a nice picture of horses, when we're talking about terrible things, this is what is used to sedate an animal as large as a horse. And usually it's not the first line of sedation. It's when you need that extra potent strength to get a large animal sedated. So New Hampshire actually had some cases and was seeing xylazine in our communities a few years ago. And in the governor's office, we travel around the state to hear what's actually going on and kind of that boots on the ground experience. So we're not just looking at high level data all the time. So we had feedback from a recovery community organization that people who were using substances were actually, they had xylazine in their supply. So per usual, the media picks up on it. Now everybody knows about it. It's a few years later. It has been in New Hampshire, but it hasn't been extensively or regularly tested for. So I included little snippets from the medical examiner's data where they were able to confirm that 3 cases last year involved xylazine in combination with fentanyl and other drugs. And this year so far, there have been 3 more cases. It's especially scary that this has made its way into the drug supply because it causes really severe wounds. So people need wound care. And because it's not an opioid, it's not responsive to naloxone, the opioid reversal antagonist, or Narcan is its brand name. Briefly wanted to show you all signs of use. This presentation is recorded and I believe will be sent out. So I don't want to read line by line what the physical, behavioral, and warning signs of substance use in general, but also opioid use entail. But my, not advice, that's not the right word, but I always tell people, are things not adding up or making sense? Like, is something off with the person that you're watching, who you love? Again, this breaks down the physical behavioral signs, but if you're at a point where you're really, really unclear whether someone is using substances or not, a lot of times there's clues and people are very secretive typically, but are there those advanced warning signs? So again, please feel free to read through these afterward, but I didn't want to get too deep into it because I am not a doctor, so I don't want to talk about symptoms that maybe I don't have business talking about. These are the signs of an opioid overdose. You'll see someone who's unresponsive, very slowed or stopped breathing, slowed or stopped heart. They'll likely look pale or grayish. They may have cold, clammy skin, the discolored lips and fingernails. And I just alert people to this because you never know who's attending presentations on fentanyl, what level of knowledge they have or awareness of things like the opioid reversal agent naloxone. Again, this is something that Recovery Friendly has trainings on, Narcan administration. So if you're interested in learning more about that, you know who to talk to, Karen. What you do if you see signs of an overdose is you call 911, you administer naloxone if you have it on hand. I carry it around on my keys because I am the meanest person alive when I'm hot and this stuff cannot get hot. So I know anywhere my keys are. I'm an AC, Narcan is an AC. So thank you to Addiction Recovery Coalition of New Hampshire for thinking to put it on a keychain. You would also practice standard CPR. And This is an image from the campaign I'm about to talk about. So I just previewing kind of the materials. We're encompassing not only informational things about fentanyl, but also what you can do. So this is the what of the campaign. It's called No Safe Experience, it was born of a meeting with the governor and commissioners and the commissioner of safety, Robert Quinn. He actually said when he was explaining fentanyl, hey, right now, like with the drug landscape we are experiencing right now, there's absolutely no safe experience with using drugs right now. And that kind of stuck with the governor, and he was like, I need a no safe experience campaign to talk about this, because people see it in the news, but they might not click on it because, oh, that doesn't affect me. My kid would never, my this or that would never. So this is just to make people aware of what fentanyl is and just how deadly it is, and that it is here in New Hampshire, and it may not be in the form that you're expecting it. If you are interested, this is a link to the press conference of the governor and other state officials announcing the launch of the campaign. You can see me in the background looking very mad, and it's because I'm upset that fentanyl is so widespread and so many people in New Hampshire are dying and people don't know about it, and people find a way to politicize everything. So if you are interested in seeing that, the link will be available at the end of the presentation. I don't think this group is too interested in the nitty gritty or the money, and I always duck money and give it to my boss, Dave Mara, to talk about. So just in case anyone cares, this is funding that is 100% federal. It came from the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, and the governor thought that this was an important enough campaign to put $500,000 behind it because so many lives are lost prematurely. And the links here outline the contract and what the nitty gritty and the money and the dollar amounts are. If anybody on this call is interested, I certainly don't like talking about money, so I'm flying by this one. Who was involved in the creation of this messaging? It's the governor's office, Department of Safety, State Police, Department of Education, the Bureau of Drug and Alcohol Services out of the Department of Health and Human Services, the Governor's Youth Advisory Council on Substance Misuse and Prevention. We brought prevention experts to the table and a marketing company to put it all together. We brought this many voices and stakeholders to the table because we want the message to be effective, and we just really want people to know that fentanyl's here. It's here and it can kill you. We had a tough time with this campaign because we know that Just Say No and DARE programs haven't historically worked at preventing people from trying substances. And we know that fear-based campaigns don't traditionally work, but I've been to a number of already executed fentanyl campaigns, and I've asked the question over and over, how do we put on a campaign that is fact-based when the facts that we're relaying also instill fear? So we brought this group of experts together to try to hone the message, and that is what, oh, not yet, sorry. I just like to point out that we included youth in this because that's one of our main demographics, our main audiences. So we're not going to talk about kids without including them in what they think they would be receptive to hearing. So we had the Governor's Youth Advisory Council help with the messaging and the development, and they actually took a look at it and said, one thing that we pay attention to are people with lived experience, not necessarily a police officer saying don't do drugs like the DARE campaign, because of course a police officer is going to say that it is against the law. Whereas when you see someone who may have lived experience, whether that be someone who survived or a parent whose child has passed, that's what these kids in particular said that they would listen to. So that feedback went to the marketing campaign, and they actually are including a whole segment on it. This breaks down who we're trying to target, and God bless the marketing company, because we're like, well, we want everyone to know. They're like, well, you need target audiences in order for it not to flop. So we said, well, what about parents and youth? So on one hand, we want to let parents know kind of the forms that it's coming in and whether you think your kid is using substances or not, to just talk to them about it. So on that hand, we're just trying to encourage community conversation and conversations from parent to child. Like, hey, just so you know, this is out there. Have you heard of it? Did you know that it's being pressed to look like pills that are illegitimate? And then on the other hand, we want to target youth who may be inclined to try substances. And the whole purpose of it just being like all facts blasted out to parents and youth is that we really are trying to just get the facts out there. Like we're not trying to follow the path of the just say no, but we just want you to know KNOW, not just say no. But we are trying to arm youth with as much knowledge as possible so that it's kind of that informed consent model where their friend offers them a pill and they may pause just long enough. Oh, I saw something about how that might not be an actual pill from a pharmacy. It might actually have fentanyl in it. Or maybe you are wanting to try cocaine because it's another thing that's very popular in the media. But if you give them that second of hesitation when they're in a period of development where they make very rash decisions, we just want them to pause to have this knowledge, because kids are way smarter than we give them credit for. And if you sometimes just give them the education, give them the knowledge, they make better decisions than we think. So that is one sector that we're trying to reach in this campaign. Our goals are to reach those who may be at risk. So maybe kids who are inclined to try substances. We know that this campaign is not going to necessarily stop people who are in active substance use disorder, stop them from using fentanyl, but this campaign is more geared toward people who may not have any idea what the substance is, where it's coming from. And then again, trying to get as many facts out there as possible, debunk those myths. And we don't want to spread fear. So we built out a really extensive resources page, because I feel like a lot of fear-based campaigns are like, here's this thing to scare you, but we're not going to tell you how to avoid or deal with this very scary thing we're talking about. So we made a point to build out a very extensive resources page so that not only are we telling them facts that may also be scary and instill fear, but also giving them places to go to either learn more, or if they're already having a problem, knowing where to go on that end. And then the last piece is to help educate the public so that the public starts to educate each other. Like, hey, did you see that billboard? What is that all about? And that is the goal of this campaign. This is built out with that $500,000 by creating a logo and branding. Again, you saw the press conference the governor held with other state officials. They built out a website, nosafeexperience.org, and that is what a lot of the materials directs people to go to, again, so that it's not like this much fentanyl can kill you, but it's like, learn more, nosafeexperience.org. What are the resources? What can we do? How do we talk to our kids? Another thing is PSAs, whether through radio, TV, social media platforms, and again, kind of the ones that youth are going to pay attention to. Sorry, mom and dad, Facebook is not a thing anymore. So that's where we'll be targeting adults and parents. But when we're putting PSAs together to let youth know that fentanyl is in all sorts of substances, those are more the Instagrams, Twitters. We also have digital ads upcoming are some video assets that'll be on the website as well. And then printed materials are what I imagine a lot of people on this call may be interested in having access to, and I'll get into those in a second. There will be billboards, bus stops, bus signage, and then lastly, we also have a dissemination plan to get all this information to schools. This is what the branding looks like. The key message is that there's really no safe experience unless something's prescribed to you and taken to you only as directed. So in the branding, it includes kind of like iconic pills, like pills people can recognize, like Xanax or OxyContin. And fentanyl comes in powder form as well, so it's making its way into the cocaine supply. And like I was saying with the salt and sugar before, like you can't pick apart and tell the difference if you are throwing that in a NutriBullet. So the same thing is happening when they're packaging up cocaine, for example. And then we also include a vape cartridge because there are instances of kids buying black market cartridges that may have been contaminated with fentanyl, and whether that's intentional or not does not matter. We really are just trying to drive home the point that because the drug landscape is so lethal right now, there's really absolutely no safe experience with substances, because since it takes such a small amount of fentanyl to prematurely end someone's life, it's making its way into everything. And the vape part of this gets a little bit politicized because of marijuana. Bringing that into the conversation always politicizes things, but we just really needed to focus on getting politics out of it and just letting people know that really right now with substances, you don't know what you're taking, and because of that, there's not really any safe experience. This is a picture of the website where you can get the facts, learn more about the campaign. Again, that really extensive built out resources list. And then there's also the publicly available toolkit, which includes kind of like materials for schools, all the printable assets and social media repostables. So that is all digitally available on this website. These are a few of the billboards that have been put out so far in Manchester and Nashua. So when you're driving, you may see some materials from this campaign. And I believe these are running through November of 2023, which is a pretty long time. Some bus signage again in Manchester, Nashua, because those are areas where there are two largest cities. They're the highest rates of drug overdoses in general, but also drug overdose deaths. So having this sign out to just try to stop the spread of fentanyl in the community by maybe preventing one kid from passing away because they took a pill that they thought was an OxyContin. These are the printable materials that are also digitally available. I put toolkit in quotations because I joke with my sister all the time. What adult came up with the word toolkit, and why is everything a toolkit, and why do I see it everywhere I go? But we have a toolkit. So we have materials available for education, and the National Guard was able to distribute to the 81 public high schools in New Hampshire. And the reason we have it digitally available is because obviously that leaves out private school, homeschool, charter school, all of that. So we wanted them to have access to this material as well. And the Department of Education posted on their platform Canva all of the built out toolkit so that teachers who are already overburdened aren't having to research fentanyl and say the right thing versus the wrong thing. So it's just kind of prepackaged so that it's one less thing on their plate, but if they choose to teach about it, it's all packaged very nicely. This is the front and back of the wrap card that you can request. Jen Graham, who I believe is on this call, if you want to ask her any questions about materials or what it would take to get those up in maybe your businesses or something like that, that's her email listed. And again, all of this is digitally available if you want to see all of it before. I tried to hang up one of the large posters behind me as a prop, but you can't see it. It's over a window. Again, a couple elements that are upcoming because I say we, the marketing company, really built out phase one of the project to just get the information out as soon as possible, because the sooner the better with things that people's lives depend on. So then phase two will include some more of those things that took a longer time to produce, like video assets and those clips on lived experience. these are a few resources that I just wanted to weave into the presentation in case this isn't the campaign for you, or you feel like I didn't explain fentanyl that well. These are other places that you can learn about it. And then a few crisis helplines. So 988 is a national number, and that's the suicide and crisis line that you can call or text anytime anonymously. There's the New Hampshire 211 general helpline, and that is also where you can access naloxone or brand name Narcan for free. And then the New Hampshire Rapid Response Access Point number that you can also call or text, which would send a team if you're having a mental health or substance use crisis. And then, of course, I always want to mention that youth coalitions, public health networks, and recovery community organizations are a really big piece in this puzzle of solving the substance crisis. So on our website, it links out to all those organizations in New Hampshire. So what can you do? I've talked about all of the dreadful and scary facts about fentanyl, but here are a few concrete things that you can do. You've already taken the first step. You're on a webinar to learn about fentanyl and what you can do. So I always tell people, just educate yourself. Do you know what it is? Do you know how to spell it? Do you know what naloxone is? So educate yourself and others as much as possible. Also, just keep talking about it, because in the case of kids, it's kind of funny because I think my parents are on this call, but you pick up on a lot more of what your parents say than maybe parents are aware of. So just being aware of what you're talking about and how you're talking about it. Sharing this information with your neighbors, which is also funny because I have an old neighbor who is on this call as well. So just making sure that everyone in the community, hey, did you see that billboard? Oh, did you see the rack card at the liquor store, which we're distributing through DMV's liquor stores, really just anywhere. We put up posters and materials up in the state house so that legislators can see it, because as soon as they see something, they have something to say about it. So that was our goal. So talk about it. Review the signs of use and overdose, which I briefly outlined in this presentation, but you may want to find information from a doctor or a healthcare professional. Get trained in naloxone administration, which is something, again, that Karen and the Recovery Friendly Workplace team can help out with if you're interested. Dispose of any unwanted or unused medications, and you can use tools like doTERRA bags or Dispose RX. I'm not advocating for any brand in particular, but those are little pouches that you put medications in, and it effectively deactivates the substance, so they're no longer able to be used or misused. And if you don't have those pouches, which are also free at, I believe public health networks have them, you can look up where a safe disposal site is. A lot of police departments or fire departments have them. So I would just take a look at where you can drop off those unused medications. Carry naloxone with you, and again, you can call 211 and access it for free at any doorway. The public health networks have it on hand too. The state gives these kits out for free, which includes, like in that picture, it has the box of Narcan, it has a CPR face shield for rescue breaths, gloves, and it includes a harm reduction tool, which is fentanyl test strips, which you can test your substance. I always bring this up, and kind of awkward because my parents are here, but when you hand out condoms for free, it doesn't mean that more sex is happening. It just means that you're giving tools for them to not have lifelong consequences. So just offering tools for people to not have the lifelong consequence of passing away if they are using fentanyl, to have these strips available to test their other substances when they are not anticipating or wanting to ingest fentanyl. The state also gives out, in that upper picture, nalox boxes, which are strategically placed next to AED machines that you see in most buildings. So it's a tool to make Narcan more visible to the community, but also a way to have it on site in a way that looks professional. You can have these at your business, and if you are interested in getting those for free, I'm sure Recovery Friendly can connect you to them. If not, I have Jennifer Sabin, the State Opioid Response Director's contact at the end of this presentation, who you can request them from directly. Lastly, share these materials freely and widely. We want as many people to know about fentanyl as possible. And you really have no idea who will read it and who it will reach. So go to the website, learn more about fentanyl and what you can do there. I just wanted to say that all these links are available for you to look over if you're interested, but some of it's a little boring. So I also want to thank the Recovery Friendly Workplace for hosting me and all of you for attending. This tells you how to access naloxone, how to request these materials from the marketing company, and request them within a week so that they can get all these printed materials to you and figure out how many you need and where you would like to put them, that sort of thing. And then again, if you are interested in putting a nalox box on site, contact Jennifer Sabin. And my contact is listed below if you have any questions that I can't answer right now, which I believe opens it up for questions.
Thank you so much, Eliza. That was very informative. And I do believe in the context of your narrative, you did answer the advanced questions that we had come in earlier. But if I've missed anything, by all means, I'd love whoever I might have missed to jump right in. But meanwhile, I wanted to share a couple of comments in the chat. One is consider including people in recovery in the next campaign. And I think I heard you reference that there were going to be lived experience stories shared. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, so again, that was the kids' idea, and we don't like to talk about people without them. So that's a component of the campaign of people who have stories to tell about what their experience with fentanyl or accidental fentanyl ingestion is like. One example I know of is a mother who lost their son to a fentanyl overdose. And then we also had heard an anecdotal story of a mother who was driving her son and he took a pill, happened to be in the car with her, and started overdosing. Luckily, he was with someone, so she hauled herself to the fire department where he was able to be revived. But that's one of those stories that we don't necessarily hear super often, because a lot of times if no one's around or Narcan's not on hand or you're not right by a fire department or you didn't use with someone there, you may pass away. So that's one of the, I suppose, good stories, because a child survived taking a pill that was not a pharmaceutical, it was fentanyl. So the lived experience page will have people involved who are affected by fentanyl in some way, speaking to people about the campaign and about their experience.
I'm so glad to hear that it will be both those indirect lived experience perspectives and someone who may have survived actually in some way, shape, or form. So that's very positive, I think, because I think that helps others to be, it's more relatable sometimes. I also see another question. Is this limited to New Hampshire companies? And specifically, she's asking about the RAC card and the digital information.
I think that it's a New Hampshire-based campaign, so some of those resources listed on that RAC card aren't going to be relevant to your state, but I think that a lot of the digital assets are easily transferable to whatever state you're in. So I don't know if RAC cards in particular would be super helpful, but having the posters may be, because that just directs people to a website that lets them know about the campaign.
And I think by you also promoting the 988, which is a national resource for anybody in any state, they would be able to connect to similar types of facts about fentanyl and so forth. There is someone asking, I'm wondering if anyone took into consideration that it still is unsafe with a prescription. Is that touched upon in the campaign at all?
That has been brought up, and I think that kind of drive-by message of on a billboard of there's no safe experience without a prescription. You can't have too many words on there, and we were trying to talk about other illicit substances not being safe, but this is primarily a fentanyl campaign. So that has been raised to us before. I think it came down to how many words you can read by driving by. I think I'm not 100% sure if there's something that specifically outlines prescription use on the website, but I can certainly talk to the marketing company about getting something, a little blurb about that added if we feel strongly about that.
Oh, thank you for that flexibility. And then if you could just reiterate, and I believe her email is still up on the screen on your slide, for anyone, because I know we had a question from the airport originally about being able to distribute and display campaign materials. They would contact Jen Graham to arrange for that, as well as rack cards and things like that. Is that correct?
Yep. And again, her information is on the screen, and just let her know you came to this presentation or don't. All that matters is that you're asking for materials.
Excellent. And with that, those are all the questions that I'm seeing in chat. However, if there's anyone here that has a final question or two, we welcome them. You can just unmute yourselves and ask the question verbally if you'd like, and we'll just wait another minute for those that may be having a final question to ask Eliza. All righty, well, seeing no additional questions, and people are starting to put in the chat. Great job, Eliza. Thank you. Thank you so much. I echo that from our Recovery Friendly Workplace team and all of you. We so appreciate you sharing this vital information. And of course, our hope is that it will continue to save lives the more people know about it. So thank you, Eliza, for presenting today.
Well, thank you so much. It's so important that you're all here to learn about it and taking time out of your day to do so. So I really appreciate you all taking the time.
All right, and so we'll look forward to potentially seeing you next Tuesday at 11 o'clock.